Story is an often misunderstood aspect of fighting games, treated poorly by the community who play it and an afterthought to the people who make it. While most fighting game stories are globe-trotting anime adventures or poorly thought out attractions for casuals, fighting game lore is a fascinating thing to some and an embarrassment to others. I happen to fall into both categories, so join me as I regale you with some of the many stories told to us from fighting games. It's been some time since the events of the First World Warrior tournament that saw the unknown Ryu defeat the King in Muay Thai Sagat with a powerful short Gouken. After leaving the tournament, Ryu holds off on visiting his master Gouken due to feeling unsatisfied with his current journey, while also showing concern at a strange power he felt upon defeating Sagat. Having once thought of Sagat as the strongest fighter in the world, Ryu wonders if he'd now be considered the strongest instead after defeating him. Not wanting to accept that he may have already achieved his goal so early, Ryu begins wandering the world and getting into fights, wanting to hone his strength even more. Eventually, Ryu masters a new move, a more powerful version of the Sudoken that he names the Shinku Hadoken. After winning several tournaments in America, including the US Martial Arts Tournament, Ryu's old friend and rival Ken Masters soon hears about Ryu's victory over Sagat in the World Warrior Tournament. Amazed at his friend's rise in strength, Ken immediately puts his training on hold and leaves behind his new girlfriend Eliza to fly to Japan with the hope of fighting Ryu. Ken heads straight for his master Gouken's dojo, expecting Ryu to have already gone there following his victory over Sagat. Upon arriving, Ken is met by a horrific sight. His master Gouken is dead, and standing before him is his murderer. Ken immediately goes to attack Gouken's killer, but the man is far stronger than Ken could ever hope to be, and beats him with ease. The killer decides to spare Ken for unknown reasons and vanishes, leaving him alone with his master's body. Not long after, Ryu arrives at Gouken's dojo, feeling more satisfied with his journey. Upon arriving, Ryu is shocked to see Ken and soon discovers what has happened. Ryu is crushed by his master and father figure's murder and plans to find his killer and defeat him. Ken too decides to go out into the world and seek vengeance for Gouken's death, but wonders who the murderer might have been. Together, Ryu and Ken ponder over the killer's identity and eventually remember a moment from their childhoods they have forgotten. During their training as children, Ryu and Ken had secretly watched Gouken fight a man outside his dojo. Upon asking Gouken who the man was, Gouken had only identified him as Akuma, his brother and a fellow student under their master Gotetsu, who Akuma had killed long ago. Finally knowing who their target is, Ryu and Ken agree to put their sparring match on hold and leave Gouken's dojo behind to find Akuma and defeat him. Upon heading back out into the world, Ryu and Ken soon discover that the world has been drastically changing since their victories in their previous tournaments. The two hear several rumours about an evil criminal group that are making their way towards global domination. Known as Shadaloo by those aware of their exploits, the criminal organisation is said to be led by a man named Bison. Feared by many as an incredibly powerful fighter and criminal mastermind, Bison uses the fear and reputation of himself and Shadaloo to commit a wave of crime across the world. Only one person alive today has any knowledge of Bison and the man he once used to be before he became the evil dictator of Shadaloo, the mysterious fortune teller Rose. When Bison was a younger man and a simple wandering fighter, he became a master of soul power, an ability that can change mental powers into physical ones. The only person known to be taught soul power by Bison was Rose, who became a master of it in her own right. Years later, Bison would soon be taught psycho power from a seasoned practitioner, with psycho power being used as the darker side of soul power. However, Bison would soon be corrupted by his desire for more strength, and eventually killed the master who had taught him psycho power. Now seeking world domination with his new powers, Bison would go back out into the world and eventually found Shadaloo. Rose, powerless to stop her former master, would retreat to her native Italy and begin her fortune-telling practice while searching for a way to stop Bison, who began leaving thousands of victims around the world in his wake. One such victim is Chun-Li, a young Interpol agent from China who has been searching for her missing father Dorai ever since he vanished when she was a child. Having always longed to find out the truth surrounding his disappearance and his current whereabouts, Chun-Li often uses her Interpol connections to find out more, but has always stopped from seemingly digging any deeper. It's only upon a chance encounter with her father's old friend, the legendary assassin Gen, that Chun-Li finally discovers the truth. Dorai, being a Hong Kong police officer with a strong sense of justice, began investigating Shadaloo and its leader Bison, but was soon found out and possibly killed by the organisation as a means to prevent anyone else from following his trail. Chun-Li, horrified at Gen's tale, demands Interpol allow her to investigate Shadaloo, but is immediately denied in order to not interfere with the cartel or Bison. Suspecting that Shadaloo has already bribed the higher-ups of Interpol, Chun-Li decides to split off from her agency and investigate Shadaloo and Bison herself in the hopes of discovering the true fate of her father. Meanwhile in the United States, Charlie Nash, a first lieutenant in the US Air Force, spends his days fighting for justice and training with his best friend, the Air Force Commander Guile. One day, Charlie is given a top-secret mission by his superiors. track down M. Bison and uncover any hidden Shadaloo soldiers that have infiltrated the American military. Unable to trust anyone, not even his friend Guile, Charlie doesn't inform anyone of his orders and secretly leaves the country in the dead of night to begin his mission. Upon discovering that Charlie has gone missing, Guile becomes concerned for his comrade and begins looking into what happened. Within Shadaloo itself, the newly recruited Sagat dedicates himself to training and further honing his body and skills in order to gain his revenge against Ryu. Consumed with rage and hatred over the finals of the previous World Warrior tournament, Sagat has only joined with Shadaloo as one of its 4 Heavenly Kings thanks to their offer of unlimited resources in finding the constantly wandering Ryu. Having abandoned his honour as a practitioner of Muay Thai, Sagat soon draws the attention of his former student Adon, who has turned on his master after he failed to uphold the values of their fighting style following his loss to Ryu, choosing to no longer see Sagat as the king of Muay Thai. Wanting the title for himself, Adon confronts Sagat and asks him if he truly thought he could escape him. Adon declares that he must now kill Sagat after having found him, but Sagat ignores the student's words and engages him in battle. Adon is able to beat Sagat, but it's unknown if Sagat simply let Adon win due to him being more focused on defeating Ryu. Regardless of Sagat's real intent, Adon stands over his defeated master and declares that his style of Muay Thai is old and useless, and that if he tries to fight Adon again, he'll crush him. Wanting to fully usurp the legacy of Sagat, Adon defaces the nearby Buddha statue with a flying knee and decrees that he is now the god of Muay Thai. The British street thug Birdie lives a simple life of petty crime after failing to win the previous World Warrior tournament. Deciding his thuggish life is no longer good enough and wanting more than just the table scraps gang life brings, Birdie soon hears of Shadaloo and their recruitment of Sagat and assumes that the organisation is hiring. Birdie decides to find Shadaloo's leader, the mysterious M. Bison himself, and demonstrate his fighting ability in the hopes of joining the cartel. After travelling the world and beating up anyone that might have any info, Birdie eventually tracks Bison down to one of his secret bases in Brazil. Birdie confronts Bison and tells him to make him an offer, but the only offer Bison makes is to destroy Birdie for his reckless choice to confront Bison directly. Birdie demands a better offer, to which Bison decides to humour, telling Birdie that if he can survive his onslaught, he can join the organisation. Birdie and Bison then fight each other, with Bison being the clear victor. However, Birdie is indeed able to withstand Bison's psycho power and remain standing. Impressed with Birdie's tenacity, Bison accepts Birdie as a member of Shadaloo, to Birdie's glee. Once inside Shadaloo's command centre, Birdie is forced to perform in a multitude of grueling experiments with the goal of gaining more data for Shadaloo's scientists. Realising that he's been tricked by Bison, Birdie vows to escape the organisation and pay Bison back for exploiting him. Meanwhile in Metro City, things have finally calmed down since the Mad Gear Gang's failed attempts to control the city by kidnapping Mayor Mike Hagar's daughter Jessica. With the gang now fully dispelled following Belga's death at the hands of Cody Travers, Jessica's boyfriend, several of its former members try to pick up the pieces left following its dissolution. Sodom, the Japanophile wannabe samurai, still desperately tries to form a new Mad Gear gang by recruiting fighters across the world, but fails to convince anyone to join him. Fed up at his constant inability to recruit anyone, Sodom decides to return to Metro City in the hopes of bringing together his former gangmates to reform the Mad Gear. Upon returning to the city, Sodom runs into Rolento F. Shugurg, another former member of the Mad Gear, and tries to convince him to join his new faction, but Rolento refuses, saying that he has a new vision of what his own utopia should be. Disappointed, Sodom resumes his search for his old gang members when he runs into none other than Guy, the Bushinryu ninja who had helped Cody and Hagar defeat the Mad Gear. Guy expresses his disdain at Sodom still being the same as he always was, but Sodom tells Guy that he's simply in a class of his own. Angered at Guy having once helped destroy his gang and with him now insulting him, Sodom attacks Guy but is soon once again defeated soundly by the ninja, who tells Sodom to give up his life of crime before leaving him. Still not satisfied with leaving the Mad Gear gang in the past, Sodom once again leaves Metro City and heads for Japan in search of strong allies. Sodom decides to focus his recruiting efforts on sumo wrestlers and decides to try and recruit the up-and-coming sumo wrestler E. Honda by beating him in a sumo match. Back in Metro City, Guy tries to continue his Bushinryu training, but is soon interrupted by Rolento, who plans to make his move with his new gang of militiamen. Guy is surprised to see Rolento again, but is annoyed that Rolento still hasn't learned his lesson from his last beating. The two fight, and similar to Sodom's attempts at beating Guy, Rolento fails to defeat the ninja. Angered at his loss, Rolento flees and returns to his base of operations, where he decides that the time is now for him to create his new perfect utopia. Deciding that this country needs discipline, order, strength and power, Rolento makes his move. In his office in Metro City, Mayor Hagar receives a phone call where he's informed that everyone is currently in an uproar as Rolento has started attacking the city. Hagar turns on his TV to see Rolento and his army ride through the streets of Metro City in tanks as Rolento tells the populace that if they listen to him, he'll make this country the strongest in the world. After the interruptions of Sodom and Rolento, Guy finally nears the completion of his Bushinryu training. He meets with his master and the current Grandmaster of Bushinryu, Zeku, who acknowledges Guy as a potential successor to their style. Zeku reminds Guy that Bushinryu is simply a name and that Guy will only become strong when he realizes that fighting styles are not something that is handed down, but rather something that is created. Guy tells Zeku that the time has come for him to become the next Bushinryu Grandmaster, as he feels like he can now overcome everything. Zeku asks Guy if he'd stake his life on this claim, to which Guy says he does. The master and student then clash with honor, not hatred. Their fight is long and arduous, but Guy is eventually able to strike Zeku down and become the 39th heir to the Bushinryu style. While travelling the world in search of Akuma, Ryu continues to hone his skills by engaging in street fights. While facing an opponent in Japan, Ryu is spotted by a young schoolgirl named Sakura Kasugano. Sakura, already having an interest in martial arts, becomes obsessed with Ryu and his strength upon seeing him fight. Wanting to be as strong as him someday, Sakura begins emulating Ryu's Ansatsuken fighting style and manages to hone her skills well enough to be able to throw Hadokens and launch Shoryukens with no formal teaching. Desiring strongly to be Ryu's student, Sakura eventually risks the wrath of her parents and skips school to travel the world in search of Ryu, while also hoping to get stronger. Eventually, Sakura stumbles across Ryu back in Japan, where he still hopes to find and defeat Akuma. Sakura rushes over to Ryu and tells him that she's been looking for him, but Ryu just asks Sakura what she wants with him. Sakura chides Ryu for speaking rudely to his number one fan, which doesn't impress Ryu either. Sakura and Ryu then fight, but to her shock, she's able to defeat the clearly unfocused Ryu. Upon his loss, Ryu immediately goes to leave as Sakura tries to stop him, telling him that she wants to be stronger and learn more from him. Sakura eventually resorts to begging Ryu to be her master and teacher, but Ryu refuses, telling Sakura that he's still learning himself and doesn't have time for schoolgirl games. Ryu tells Sakura that she's on her own before leaving, but Sakura manages to take a picture of Ryu to remember him by. Back home, Sakura keeps Ryu's picture close by as she stares at it while on her way to school. Sakura knows that Ryu let her win, but wonders what he meant by his claim that he's still learning, with her having thought that street fighting was just for fun. Sakura wonders if Ryu knows the true meaning of fight, and vows to ask him the next time she sees him. Sakura is then joined by a school friend who asks her who the man in the picture is. Sakura tells her friend that the man might be her master, which confuses her, but Sakura tells her to forget about it as she soon begins running to school, not wanting to be late. In India, the yoga practitioner Dalsum sees the poverty and harsh living conditions his village deals with and decides to leave in order to gain the money needed to help them. Despite being a pacifist at heart, Dalsum decides to raise the money by taking part in fighting competitions. Due to his abnormal fighting style, Dalsum is able to win a large amount of fights and soon raises the money needed to help his village. Upon returning home, Dalsum sinks into a deep meditation and decides to cleanse himself of the evil force that has come from engaging in so many fights. While wondering what good can come from his destructive abilities, Dalsum is interrupted by members of his village who address him as the Great Yoga Master. They inform Dalsum that his many victories have greatly benefited the village as they now have access to medicine and food, and that everyone is very grateful towards Dalsum. Dalsum is then joined by his wife Sally and newborn son Datta as Dalsum asks her if he has created bad karma via his actions. Sally tells Dalsum that things are better for everyone and that she's very proud of him. Despite his wife's words, Dalsum still worries if the ends justify his choice to fight. In Russia, the Red Cyclone Zangief is treated as a national Russian hero due to his vast strength and notoriety as a wrestler. The president of the Soviet Union grants Zangief their country's full support in exchange for him to travel the world and show off the might of Russia. Zangief leaves Russia and sets his sights on America, wanting to take on the strongest fighter he can find there. Upon arriving, Zangief hears of Ken Masters and his recent victory in the US martial arts tournament. Zangief decides to confront Ken and meets him aboard a private yacht that Ken is currently using to host a birthday party for Eliza. Upon seeing him, Ken asks Zangief what boat he stepped off at and proceeds to mock him by calling him a mama's boy when Zangief tells Ken that he's from Mother Russia. Zangief becomes enraged at Ken's insults and begins fighting him. The two skills are close, but the experienced Zangief is able to defeat Ken and claims another victory for the Soviet Union. After celebrating his victory over Ken, Zangief is met by the president who congratulates Zangief on all his victories. An emotional Zangief simply states that he did it for the motherland, but the president tells Zangief that their country relies on him to prove the unbeatable power of Russia to the whole world. Zangief returns home and begins a strict training regimen funded, on a limited budget, by the president, which includes Zangief fighting bears in Siberia. The president gives his best hopes to Zangief as he plans to use his success to help Russia once again rise to power. Having desired a quiet life following his loss to Ryu in the World Warrior Tournament, Gen tries his best to help his friends and family run a restaurant, but his former life as a legendary assassin gives him no peace as he constantly has to fend off old foes and contract killers that are still after him. Tired of constantly hiding but to no avail, Gen decides to leave his quiet life behind and go out into the world fighting in a blaze of glory, feeling it to be a more honourable fate than sitting around. After fighting numerous petty criminals and crime syndicates, Gen soon hears that Akuma is currently travelling the world in search of strong opponents. Deciding that Akuma would be a worthy final battle for him, Gen tracks down Akuma to his hidden island and confronts him. Gen notes that while Akuma has a human body, his powers and energy are not of their world, and promises that he will be the one that sends Akuma back to hell. The two engage in a true showcase of fighters, with each man being able to survive the other's killing blows. Gen, however, perhaps due to his wider experiences, is able to surpass Akuma's abilities and defeats him. Akuma tells Gen to finish him already, but Gen refuses and simply leaves Akuma to his fate. As Gen sails back to the mainland, he admits that it would have been easy for him to kill Akuma then and there, but he would have lost his greatest joy in the remaining days of his life. Gen then starts coughing up blood, revealing that he is dying of leukemia. Gen takes the diagnosis on his chin and claims that he'd rather die fighting. Angered at his loss and being shown mercy from Gen, Akuma travels to China in search of him, where he finds the old warrior in a dingy back alley. Gen asks Akuma why he has returned to him, to which Akuma says that he seeks Gen's defeat. The two then have their rematch, but this time Akuma is able to defeat the terminally ill Gen. Gen acknowledges his loss and tells Akuma that he can't continue on, but instead of killing the legendary assassin, Akuma simply leaves him alone in the alley. Gen immediately knows that Akuma is aware of his illness and spared him due to it not being a fair fight, though he still wonders where he might have gone. Akuma, having journeyed to the Great Wall, stands atop one of its towers as he stares at the moon. Akuma ponders over all the worthy challenges that have faced him as he wonders if the world is not as weak as he thought it was. Deciding to continue living in the mortal world, Akuma desires to hone his killing power to perfection, hoping that he will be the next to die. Having left the Shadaloo base to hunt down Ryu, Sagat eventually tracks him down to Australia, where the two confront each other in a stormy field at night. Sagat's scar burns in the presence of Ryu, the mere sight of him fueling Sagat's desire to gain his revenge. Ryu notices that Sagat still hasn't recovered from their last fight, but Sagat promises to scar Ryu this time with a new move he has been working on, the Tiger Blow. The two fight, and although both have trained immensely since their last battle, the fight easily goes in Sagat's favour. Sagat is initially overjoyed at avenging his humiliating loss, but starts wondering why it feels like it was a hollow victory. Sagat then realises that Ryu threw the fight, hoping that Sagat would move on from his current path upon seemingly having his revenge. Sagat then returns to Shadaloo, where he meets with the rest of the four kings, Bison, Vega and Balrog. Bison notices the distant Sagat and asks him what's wrong, but Sagat instead decides to once again leave the group, though he demands Bison tell him about the nature of his psycho power the next time they meet. Sagat resumes training alone and decides that he will need a more powerful move than the Tiger Blow if he is to defeat Ryu legitimately the next time they meet, but vows to discover the move on his own without Shadaloo's help. With his mind clear, Sagat searches for his own inner strength. Ryu, having heard of Gen's clash with Akuma, manages to track down the location of Akuma's island hideout and immediately heads there with the goal of facing Gouken's killer. Upon entering the caves below the island, Ryu and Akuma finally meet for the first time in years. Ryu asks Akuma if he has gotten any better since his fight with Gouken years ago, but Akuma simply tells Ryu to be the one to tell him as the two clash. Ryu and Akuma engage in a rough battle, but Ryu is able to somehow beat his master's murderer. Akuma, however, reveals that he was simply just testing Ryu and allowed him to win. Akuma then reveals to Ryu that they both possess the same power, the Satsui no Hado, a darker version of Ansatsuken that manifests when the user accepts their intent to kill their opponent. Akuma tells Ryu that when the killing intent awakens within him, he will know what Akuma means and that all of his past battles will seem like child's play in comparison. Ryu is confused by Akuma's words, but doesn't have time to question him after Akuma destroys the caves and starts the sinking of the entire island. As Ryu tries to flee the island, Akuma tells him that when he has learned to summon all of his power, he must find Akuma again so that they can truly learn who the strongest is. As the island sinks into the ocean and Akuma vanishes, Ryu swims to the surface and expresses his frustration at losing his master's killer. Ryu is left to ponder the truth in Akuma's words as he's able to feel the sense of his untapped powers. Sometime after his battle with Ryu, Sagat trains in his native home of Thailand when he is suddenly approached by a man called Dan Hibiki. Dan, the son of the martial artist Go Hibiki, seeks vengeance for his deceased father after Sagat killed him as payback for gouging out Sagat's right eye years ago. Once a student of Gouken's, Dan was banished from his dojo once Gouken learned that Dan had wanted to learn Atsatsuken for the goal of taking Sagat's life. Dan taunts Sagat, asking him if he wants his left eye to match his missing right. Sagat tells Dan that the man who took his eye paid for his life, unaware that Dan is Go's son. Dan harshly informs Sagat of who he is, branding him a murderer, but Sagat shows no regret for his actions and threatens to have the young Hibiki join his father in death. Dan and Sagat then fight, but it doesn't take long for Sagat to realise that Dan is a complete amateur with a basic level of martial arts skill. Realising that Dan is simply a young fool throwing his life away for vengeance, Sagat feels a weird form of kinship with him and decides to purposely throw the fight in order to free Dan from his quest for vengeance, as Ryu had hoped to do for him. Dan, clueless that Sagat let him win, tearfully looks to the sky and tells his father that he has finally avenged his death and that he's now the best and strongest fighter in the world. Dan, not actually having it in him to take someone's life, decides to leave Sagat and returns to Hong Kong, where he opens up his own dojo where he teaches his unique fighting style, Saikyo Ryu. Now in pursuit of worldwide fame and seemingly convinced that his Saikyo style is actually the strongest in the world, Dan teaches people all over the world in his style in honour of his late father. However, Dan's students fail to grasp the hidden strengths of Saikyo, as Dan tells them that they have to focus in order to be Saikyo style warriors. Having spent the last few weeks deep undercover, Charlie Nash eventually discovers the whereabouts of Shadaloo's base as well as Bison's location. Travelling to Brazil, Charlie climbs to the peak of a large waterfall where he's soon met by Bison himself. Charlie immediately places Bison under arrest, but Bison simply laughs his attempts off. Charlie informs Bison that his backup helicopter will be arriving in 5 minutes as a way to convince him to surrender, but Bison instead tells Charlie that this will be the last 5 minutes of his life before attacking him. To Bison's surprise, Charlie is a strong fighter and manages to hold his own against Bison. Upon defeating him, Charlie places Bison under arrest and demands to know everything about Bison's plans and his connections to the US Army. As he continues to question Bison, Charlie's backup helicopter arrives, but suddenly turns its guns onto Charlie himself and shoots him in the back. Charlie is shocked by this betrayal as he falls off the waterfall to his death. Bison is soon joined by Shadaloo soldiers who ask the dictator if they should send a squad out to confirm Charlie's death, but Bison declines, saying that even if Charlie had somehow lived, he won't return now that he knows Shadaloo has its claws in the US Army. With his current base's location compromised, Bison plans to flee with his forces but is intercepted by Chun-Li, who had also deduced the base's location. Chun-Li questions Bison on her father's whereabouts, convinced that Shadaloo has him held somewhere. Bison, however, tells Chun-Li that she shouldn't ask questions that she's not prepared to know the answers to. The two then clash, but Bison eases off on Chun-Li, not thinking of her as a threat. After having had enough of playing with her, Bison floats into the air and tells Chun-Li that he was surprised by her fighting ability, promising to fight with both hands the next time they meet. Chun-Li tries to follow Bison, but the dictator promises her that they will meet again, though he hopes she can amuse him more than her father did. As Bison laughs maniacally, Chun-Li realizes that Bison was indeed the one who had killed her father. Even more enraged, Chun-Li is forced to watch as Bison disappears back into the underworld. Chun-Li returns to the Interpol headquarters where she meets with her superior, who appoints Chun-Li as the lead investigator of the Shadaloo case due to her prior experience with them. After her superior tells her to help avenge her father with them, Chun-Li looks out into the sea as she vows to get Bison the next time they meet. As she sheds a tear, Chun-Li promises her father that this is the last time she cries before heading off to continue her pursuit of Shadaloo. Having been observing the growing rise of Shadaloo's presence on the world stage, Rose begins to sense that Doomsday is fast approaching and that at the centre of it is a person of great evil. Convinced that the sources are Old Master, Rose finally ventures out of Italy and into the world where she tracks down the evil source, Bison himself. The former master and student finally meet each other for the first time in years as Rose tries to warn Bison once again that he is on the wrong path, but Bison continues to ignore her pleas. Rose gives Bison to the count of 3 to give up his plans for world domination, but attacks him after Bison mocks her. The two clash in a fierce battle, Soul vs Psycho. Despite the immense power gained from Psycho energy, Bison is defeated by Rose, who uses Soul power to destroy his body. With Bison seemingly dead, Rose retires to her home in Italy and decides to relax, feeling confident that Doomsday has been averted thanks to the sealing of Bison's Psycho power. Having lost track of Akuma following their clash, a dejected Ryu visits his master's dojo in order to seek the truth behind Akuma's words. However, Ryu is soon met by Ken, who has tracked Ryu down after not hearing from him since they both parted ways following Gouken's death. Ken asks Ryu where he's been, but Ryu instead asks Ken if he wants another schooling similar to the one he gave to Sagat. Ken is excited to see what Ryu has in store for him since they last fought, as the two engage in another sparring match. Despite the growth in Ryu's power, his mind is elsewhere and allows Ken to get the victory over him. Ken helps Ryu up and asks him what's wrong, having noticed that something is bothering him as his heart wasn't in their fight this time. Ken tells Ryu to stay focused, worried that his fight with Sagat as well as the events surrounding Gouken and Akuma have affected him. Ken decides to give Ryu his red hairband as a memento to keep him on the right path should he lose his way again. Ryu thanks Ken for the gift and lesson as the two friends soon once again part ways, promising to meet and fight again in the future. Back in America, Ken trains even harder with the help of Eliza, telling her how his victory was a lucky one as Ryu had gotten a lot stronger than he expected. Determined to not be the one that gets helped up the next time they meet, Ken and Eliza get back to work. Despite having destroyed Bison earlier, Rose continues to get an ominous feeling that something isn't right. After consulting her tarot cards and expecting to see Bison's end, Rose is instead horrified to see that the cards reveal that Bison is not dead as she had hoped. Rose stares at the cards in disbelief, telling herself that there must be some mistake, but deep down she knows the cards don't lie. Rose is paralysed with fear, having realised that she is powerless to stop Bison from controlling the world with his psycho power. However, Rose states that it's not over yet, as the cards speak of another who is destined to be the one that saves the world from the impending doomsday.
We await your return, warrior.